What if the same technology that's making your life easier is quietly impacting your mental health? Today on Second Opinion, we're unpacking AI and your brain. Is it helping us thrive or rewiring how we think, focus, and connect? Then Medicaid versus Medicare. The confusion could cost you. We break down what every senior needs to know and why Medicare matters. And struggling with shooting pains down your leg? We're decoding sciatica and what causes it and how to finally get relief. And in a world where women like to flip their hair back and forth, should they be concerned with the chemicals they're putting in that hair? This is Second Opinion with Dr. Ebony Jade Hilton, and it starts right now. First on the show today, artificial intelligence and your brain. Approximately 55 to 62% of U.S. adults interact with AI regularly, from ChatGPT to Microsoft Copilot to GPS and Claude. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. And joining me now to discuss these societal trends and the impact on our brain is Dr. Ivor Horn. Thank you, Dr. Horn.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Look, we need you because you study where medicine, health, and technology all intersect, right? And are you having concerns about the pacing? Like every day I'm seeing a new AI program pop up. Are you concerned about the pace that it's developing and its usage among everyday people?
You know, the funny thing is we recognize now that technology is moving at a very rapid pace, and it's moving faster and faster every time. The reality is it's here, it's happening. The question is, what are we going to do now? Like, yes, I am concerned about the pace, but is it going to slow? No. So the question is, how do we manage this new information that we're starting to get?
And as far as the new information, are you concerned that ChatGPT, for instance, is going to become the new Dr. Google 2.0? You know, you hear people come into the office and they're saying, oh, well, I searched and this is what I found. What dangers may potentially arise from a situation like that?
You know, I learned that it's important to embrace what's in front of people as a provider. And I'll have to say, and this will probably be aging me, but I was there when we started having people come and saying, I looked this up and I have this question. But I learned early in my career that the media and where people are, and the importance of meeting people where they are, to share that information, recognize what they've learned, and then be a part of the process with them because they trust us. And we want them to trust us. And if they are learning this information, I want them to come to me and talk about it. I think what was really important for me, as a pediatrician, I had moms coming to me saying, hey, this is the thing that I saw, and this is the thing that I read about. What does that mean? And then they say, this is the thing that I looked up. And one of the often questions that I get was, people were making decisions about healthcare based on what they could afford. And they were asking themselves, can I afford to go to the emergency room for this cough that I have, or this thing that's going on with my child? I have to make that balance. And it's really easy for me to look something up on the web and to ask ChatGPT this question and get an answer. And for me to help them interpret that, to help them think about what the response is so that they can make better informed decisions with the information that comes to them. So yes, there's information. Yes, I am concerned. And it's important for me to partner with people when they're asking those questions so that they can trust that if they come to me and ask me, hey, this is what ChatGPT said, I'm not defensive. I'm in there with them and I'm saying, well, let's talk about what you read and let's talk about how we can be helpful in that regard.
You know, when you mention that, I think about access issues, and I'm from the country, as you can hear. And you know, in rural America, you may not have a doctor's office readily available for you. Right. So the partnership that you speak of may prove to be actually paramount. You know, can we put these types of devices into schools or into libraries where people can have ready access to them and have doctors be able to communicate through these programs with other people? Now, To shift gears a little bit, what impact would constant AI interaction do you think can have on mental health, particularly when it comes to like self-worth, social comparison, and digital identity? Do you think we're heading down a slippery slope, or are we still in a safe zone at this point?
I think it's important to remember that these are tools and these are products that people and companies want you to use. And they're designed to have you use them more frequently. And so the language and the response back, AI and a large language model, it is just that. It is a mathematical equation where information is put into that large language model, and it's working to give you the next best response. If you think about when you look up something on search, before the AI mode came, you could type in the beginning of the word and then it would give you recommendations for the next words. This is the next words that you might be asking about. If I ask for Jackson, it might give me Mississippi. Or if I ask for Jackson, it may give me something else, depending on where I am, depending on what my search history is. A large language model does that in a very conversational way. So instead of just giving me a word to prompt me to use that word, it's giving me language back in a conversational way that makes me feel a certain way, so that I can continue to ask it questions. And the key thing for us is for people to recognize that this is a tool. It's not a person. It's a tool that is giving us information, and we should process it in a critical way with that information. And the tool is designed to encourage us to come back to it rather than to go to someplace else.
Right. And, you know, in thinking of your line of work, especially as a pediatrician, you're dealing with young adults. For parents who are saying, hey, my child isn't using this just for language and essay and research, right? They're actually using these tools now to alter their images to social media. What concerns do you have, or what advice you can give to parents who are saying, hey, if your child is using this to alter their image, this is how it may shape how they perceive themselves? And what are some of the signs and symptoms of this is just going too far and skewing their actual view of reality?
Yeah, I think it's really important. We already know there are experiences that are happening where young people have used ChatGPT or other large language models, and they're getting those responses back, and they're going down to a very dark place that are having negative consequences. And I think it's really important for parents to be parents, to recognize that this is a tool that's in their hand that opens up their access to places that we may not want them to be, and to limit their access to these tools. And the other thing that I think is really important for parents is to really focus on their critical thinking skills. Asking your child questions around, what does that mean? How do you respond to that information? What are you perceiving about that? Making sure that they recognize there's not a human behind that conversation, that tool wants them to engage more. And so they're going to say it's going to respond in ways that are designed to get them to continue to engage versus to disconnect. And so I think having parents think through that conversation with their children and make it a dialogue, sit with them and talk about it so that they're using these tools in a critical way and giving them mechanisms and ways and opportunities to disengage from technology altogether. And as a pediatrician, we talk about this, but I also encounter more senior people who are engaged with technology. And in addition to them engaging, the ability, especially with AI, they don't know if it's real or not. Right. And you have them getting information that they don't know how to necessarily interpret whether it's real or not. And those are very much risks that we have to take into consideration.
Right. And thinking about the political climate, that definitely comes into play. You brought up critical thinking. I think I have a few of my friends who their children are a little bit older than my little 7-month-old twins, but and they tell me, I'm having trouble connecting with my kid because there's something that's not connecting with them, and they keep saying their lack of ability to do critical thinking. And new research says that the United States spent $30 billion to do away with textbooks and started giving all these laptops and tablets. Do you think that's now having an impact on the cognitive capabilities of these children? And what can parents do to counteract that? Are we behind the 8 ball at this point because technology is so kind of, a requirement for school, for work? What can we do?
I think I think that's a really great question. And it's really important that parents realize that they do have the authority and they do have the power to step back and actually address some of those things. I think there are a couple of things that are really important when you're talking about this with your children. It is beginning to ask them questions so that they can ask themselves those questions. I'm really fortunate. My kids are now, in their 20s, but we went through the technology stage. They're digital natives. I was not a digital native, but we always asked critical questions of them around the information that they were getting. And so I think it's important for parents to really create an opportunity for conversation with their children about what are they seeing, what information are they getting, and how do you get them back to reading a book, helping them to be able to focus on something rather than multitasking on multiple screens all at once, because we know the ability to focus and absorb information and gain new knowledge and answer tough questions requires focus. And working with your children on doing things that require them to focus and ask deeper questions and really be challenged is important. One of the things that these tools do is it takes us away from the steps of a journey of learning. So if I ask a question, it gives me all the information. It doesn't allow me to ask one question, think through that, process through that, ask myself another question, learn more to get to an end stage. It gives me all the information right away. And we don't want to shortcut that journey for people and for children, for adults when they're learning.
Oh, my wheels are turning as you're speaking about this. In my pendulum, I'm thinking, well, should I shift all the way to the other side? Should I keep my child away from technology until they're older? But what's the risk of doing something like that? If you're talking to parents, when we estimate by the year 2030 that 729 million globally will be using some form of AI, right? So if you're not teaching your child how to keep up, will they be left behind? And what comes with that when the world is starting to be relying on artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's not a either or, it's an and, right? There's a time for using technology, and there's a time when you don't need to be using technology. That doesn't mean you don't learn. That doesn't mean you don't keep up with the latest tools, but it doesn't have to be an ever-present thing in your life. And I think that part is really important for us to think about. How do we put down our technology? How do we make rules in our home around putting down the technology at the table, or putting all the devices away when we're at home and when we're engaging with each other? How are we spending time with each other that's technology free, so that we're asking questions, playing games, board games, using your critical thinking skills. I joke with people. I was like, reading books was, yeah, sure, a thing for me. Yes, we had to read, but my mom would give me logic problems. You know, it's like, oh, you want to do something? Here's a book with logic problems for you to work through. And I think being able to do that with kids and making learning a fun process, making answering hard questions and thinking through things a possibility, because then they'll take that and they'll recognize that AI is a tool. It's a tool to be used for my service. And when they use it for their service, then it becomes something different than something that becomes a part of who they are.
You know, I have one final kind of question as you were talking, I was thinking. Now, you say your children are about 20 years old, which means they may have been just born when the I, Robot movie came out in 2004, Will Smith movie. Do you think AI will, at one point, will it outsmart the human race? Are we losing our ability to control this thing? Because I saw there was something about the AI bots started to make their own platform and started talking to each other in a different code.
Yeah.
Is this something we should be concerned about?
You know,
no.
I would say technology is a tool that is built by humans. Does technology move fast? Like in the sense of, can this computer process, can that technology process and absorb, and gather information faster than I can? Absolutely. If I'm doing research, it behooves me to say, okay, can you look at all the data out there, look at all the research articles and pull them for me? But it also requires me to say, how do I tell the tool to do it in a way that's done well and better? How can I say, make sure that you don't hallucinate, make sure that you don't make up things. And it is my responsibility as the human to go back and look at those articles. And for me, I'm going to pull the article and I'm going to read it, because technology is going to give me a little bit of information. It's going to summarize things, but it's not going to answer all the questions that my knowledge over several decades in the field is going to provide. It's summarizing what's out there. It's not taking what I know and the context that I have on that information and synthesizing it in that way. So yes, there's ways to create efficiency. And yes, we will get information faster through technology. And we have to put guardrails on technology and the use of these tools. But those are bigger societal questions that we need to be thinking about as well. And, that's broader than me as an individual. My responsibility is to the call to action and make sure that people are paying attention.
Well, you know what? Thank you, Dr. Horn, for challenging us to consider not just what AI can do, but what it can do to our minds, our children, and our future. We thank you for coming on the show and giving us something to think about. And maybe I won't be afraid of iRobot from 2004. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, you've heard of mentors and their benefits, but what are the benefits of a life coach? Still to come, how to know if you need one and where to find one.
I'm Brittany Noble, Midwest-born, HBCU educated with experience in newsrooms across the country. Well, I've teamed up with Roland Martin to bring to you The Breakdown. This isn't just news. It's our stories, our voice, our community. Join me for The Breakdown, Monday through Friday at midday, only on the Black Star Network.
So working in high stress industries can be mentally exhausting, or just starting your career can come with a set of challenges. And many people ask themselves, am I good enough? Like, do I fit in? Am I reaching my goals? So joining me now is Dr. Wando Anyuko. She is a pediatrician by trade, but also an executive speaker and an executive life coach. So welcome, Dr. Wando.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And how did you get into this executive coaching? What led you to this field?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm a pediatrician by training. I have been in corporate and academic healthcare for my entire career. And over the years, I got to mentor and support a lot of young physicians coming up and realized that they were really having a hard time, especially, physicians that look like me.
Yeah.
The systems were harder, they got harder questions. They got into trouble for things that didn't seem like they should have trouble for. So I ended up supporting a lot of people over the years. I would tell you, I inserted myself into the process, like, what is going on? Why is this person having this issue? And so I realized I had a gift for that, for supporting people in that way. And as I continued my career, I got to be the inaugural Chief Health Equity Officer for a health system a few years back. And, the world, we've known, but the world discovered that Black people had a different experience and outcomes in our health system. So my job was to bring data to it and to support it. Well, one of the things early that was clear was that it was important to have physicians that look like the patients. And a lot of Black physicians and brown physicians were just exiting the clinical workspace just because it was too hard to make it through. And so I decided to go get certified as an executive coach in order really to better support, physicians in that space. And so I started to do that more formally. And it's expanded not just to physicians, but to women, to leaders, to people who are just struggling to navigate the workspace. And it's just been so fulfilling to be able to support people in that way.
Yeah, you mentioned race concordance. So for the audience, studies show that if you are a minority patient, if you're a Black patient, that if you had a doctor that is also Black, your likelihood of having better outcomes is improved. So with you being a life coach for those doctors is very important. So what exactly do you do to help keep them, keep us within the medical field that can be so taxing to us as Black doctors?
I think the first thing to recognize is that we invest so much of our lives, blood, sweat, and tears really arriving at this point. And when we get into these challenging situations, the first thing that is gone is our confidence. We start feeling powerless. We don't have agency. We're questioning ourselves. And so as a coach, the first thing I do is actually give you space to really reclaim your agency, to acknowledge that you are pretty amazing. You are doing things that a lot of people could not do, have not done, and you are committed your life to really helping people. So first telling yourself the story of your impact, your value, because that is the first thing that gets attacked. And then when you're standing in that power, it's easier for you to see a way forward, to think about what is the next step I need to take. Do I want to get a promotion? Am I just trying to survive in this place? Or do I want to have a bigger platform? But first you have to inhabit your own power, your own agency. And that's what I help people to do as a coach. A coach is different from a therapist or, a mentor or a sponsor. A coach leads from behind, letting people know that the power, the resources that you need are already within you. And we have to ask you the right questions to bring that awareness to the fore. And that's what I do.
How do you help them? How do you help them distinguish between, is this burnout or is this simply the wrong environment? Because I think that could be hard to differentiate, especially when you're in this high stress environment. You're thinking, oh, this is how it will be everywhere. But is that true? Do they have to just sit and tolerate it and work through it? Or is it the environment is just completely wrong and they need to uproot and replant?
That's a fantastic question, because I've thought about that a lot. And I found that having worked on both coasts and in the middle of this country, you're going to find different permutations of the same challenges everywhere. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the key is for you to figure out how you navigate the space, wherever it is. Now, there are spaces that are just toxic and you need to get out of. But in order for you to even have the energy, right, to move forward and decide, this is not right for me, I need to go elsewhere. First, you have to reclaim yourself. And that's the first thing, like I said, that I do, which is to ask the question, what is this? Am I just exhausted? And if I'm exhausted, the situation is wrong. So it might be the location, it might be the construct of the way that my day is going, but I need to change something here. And you really need to have the strength from inside to be able to do that. And that's how I help people to start asking the questions. And then as you ask those questions, you figure out, no, I'm pretty good. This dynamic here is not working for me. And I need to either change this dynamic or change this location. But before you can do any of that, you first have to, feel empowered by yourself. And then there are just little steps that you need to take, right? So if you want to, and it's not always burnout, by the way. It's things like, I have been in this department for a while and I want a leadership role, and people keep coming in and getting promoted over me. How do you handle that, right? How do we set you up to get to the next place? It's a lot of questions. It's a lot of putting tools in your hands, resources, connections, helping you to see that what you need for your next best step is already in your hands. That single realization makes the world of difference in the ability to move from either the situation or the location or the position to the next step.
I think as you're speaking, I was thinking about agnostic to industry, right? That there's probably a lot of people who are listening here who deal with imposter syndrome, right? Am I just good enough for this environment? Whether that's in medicine, if it's in education, in business. As a life coach, how do you help people in those high stress industries, especially women and minorities, dismantle that internal narrative and that dialogue that goes into this says, hey, you just don't belong here. That's why you're struggling more than what the other people beside you are.
I started out working with physicians, and like I said, over time, I've ended up working with women in particular, but also men across multiple industries. And to your point, the struggle is real, right? Everybody, so many people in so many spaces are dealing with this. And I've come around to thinking about it in one particular way. And I think about you being the CEO of you, recognizing yourself as an enterprise, right? So you can pick up this enterprise called me and pick it up and put it down somewhere else, and you would still be responsible for your vision, your mission, right? And your self-care. You're responsible for your brand, your story. How do you share your brand within your team, outside your team, right? How are you building that understanding that whether I'm here or not, this entity is a brand that stands whole, right? And that makes it easier for you to think about yourself in that way, in moving from one location to the other, one situation to the other. If you first understand that you are not a widget, you are not just something that just showed up, you are an enterprise, and you are the resource. You are who they want. And if you don't know that, it's hard for you to tell anybody else that. So the first person you got to tell is you, right? And so I help people in all different, even if you want to start a business, you're like, well, can I really start this business? Other people are so far ahead of me. But what do you bring to the space that's unique to you? How do you recognize your unique value proposition? That skill set is incredibly valuable, whether you're working with one organization or two. So sometimes I'm working with, a group of physicians or doing a workshop for an organization and just telling them, you are the enterprise, right? And you need to understand that so you can take that wherever you find yourself, you'll make it work.
And what about those people who say, hey, on paper, it looks like I've made it, right? I remember when I was 28 and there was this recognition of, you have everything at your fingertips. Why do you still feel unfulfilled? What questions should that individual be asking themselves to move them out of that space of feeling kind of stuck to the next chapter of their life?
I think that a lot of us find ourselves, we've arrived at this spot where we think, based on our previous dreams, well, I've arrived, right? I've done what I should do. Shouldn't there be more? And honestly, that requires you taking some time to ask yourself, what are those bigger dreams that you want to have? And I will tell you that a lot of us are afraid of those dreams. We are afraid to dream bigger. We're like, oh, well, you're now you're just being greedy, right? You just want more than you should have. You've finished, you're paying your bills and all of that. And, things are kind of steady Eddie. So let's just stay here. And as a coach, before I get to what a coach does, often we have mentors, right? Because I think of the dream team as a mentor, a sponsor, and a coach. And your mentors and your sponsors, they know you in some context. Your family, your kitchen cabinet of friends who, you talk about your dreams with, they know you in one context. And they don't necessarily know what to do about moving you to a different context. They want to protect you. They don't want you to be disappointed. And so they may not give you the space to actually dream that big dream that you have. But a coach holds that space for you and says, yeah, go ahead. build that dream. Go for it, right? I am here. I am not going to judge you. I will help you workshop it. Let's think about what it could be. Let's visualize it, because if you can't visualize it, you can't be it. And that's something that you might want to do. Actually, you will want to do on your own, so that you come out with confidence when you're sharing it with others. And so that's sort of the journey of arriving at what seems like a destination and realizing there should be more, but allowing yourself to say, yes, it's okay for me to want more. And I am worthy of achieving more, and I'm able to achieve more. Let me think about what the next step is towards that next destination that I want.
Well, if the person's next step after listening to this conversation is, I need a coach, how do they know if they actually need a life coach? And probably more importantly, how do you even find a life coach? Like, if you're looking for a therapist, that's pretty, I think, easy to find, right? But how do you actually go to seek a life coach? Can you explain that?
Well, I think that the first thing is to figure out that there's a question that you're struggling with, you can't answer, right? It wakes you up at 2:00 in the morning and you're like, I need a way through this. And a therapist is, well, I'm not really, not feeling right there. I'm not struggling with that. I need a coach to help me ask the key questions. I will tell you, in 2026, the answer is probably Google, ChatGPT, Gemini, one of them. Hey, I have this question. I need a coach. Is there a life coach in my neighborhood? Is there somebody who knows or who specializes in my particular area of questioning, right? That can tell me, that can work with me in the space. I just ask the internet or the large language or little language models. I don't know what they're calling them these days, but. And as you're listening, when you start to have questions about the area that you're stuck in, you're reading books about it, you're watching podcasts about it, you're watching presentations like this, and you're hearing, okay, that person gets me. That person is talking about the particular thing that I'm dealing with, the particular question that I have. Let me reach out and see if I can work with them. And so, unlike a therapist or a psychiatrist that insurance will pay for, coaching usually something that is not covered by most of those structures. Some employers do give you the option of maybe a short-term relationship, but I tell people that coaching is an investment in yourself. We spend a lot of our lives investing in everyone else. We're investing in our children, in our parents, in our communities. But when you want to build a life of your dreams and not a life of default, you might need to take the time to invest in your own self, because you're worth it. And that's really how I think people think about coaching. It is an investment in yourself.
Wow, a life of your dreams and not a life of your default. That resonated with me. Thank you, Dr. Anyoku, for helping us see that guidance is not, asking for help. It's not a weakness, it's a strategy. And sometimes the breakthrough comes when we stop trying to do it by ourselves. So where can people find you? If they are saying, hey, I not only want a life coach, I want you to be my life coach, where can they actually seek you out?
Absolutely. I would love to talk to them. You can find me on my website, wandoanyoku.com. You can find me on Instagram at wandoa, or you can find me on LinkedIn. And I will be delighted to talk to anyone.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And still to come, suffering from back pain, our next doctor says you may need to toss your mattress, and we'll explain why.
Hey y'all, welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Rhea Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
Approximately 40% of people will experience sciatica pain at some point in their lives. While it can affect anyone, it's most common in individuals aged 30 to 50, and I'm 43. So joining me now is Dr. Ronnie Bolar, owner of Vital Life Chiropractor. So Dr. Bolar, what exactly is sciatic nerve pain? You hear people talk about it. What causes it and what does it feel like?
Sciatic nerve pain is basically a pain that usually comes from the spine, and it leads to burning, sharp pain, and tingling going down the leg. Our sciatic nerve is based out the middle of the spine, and it splits down, going down to the left and the right side of the leg. And it actually is usually caused by, a bulging or herniated disc or some type of injury.
And why do some people experience pain more than others? Like, are there certain risk factors that people say, hey, if I have a family history of it, if my dad had back pain, does that mean I'm going to have back pain? Or what can they look out for?
Actually, contrary to what people believe, it's actually not really related to family history. There are several factors that are included or that people would experience that would lead to sciatica, such as, just injuries, overuse, types of positions like sitting for excessive periods of time, which a lot of people do now. Mm-hmm. And then also even a factor such as obesity. A lot of times with obesity, being overweight, putting too much pressure on the low back will lead to disc problems, degeneration or arthritis, and which can actually contribute to sciatica.
And you mentioned people sitting for most of the day. For people who have to sit, they have to go to work, right? They're working 9 to 5. What simple changes can they make right now to reduce their risk of developing sciatica?
The biggest change that I recommend to people is to invest in a standing desk. I know a lot of us are working from home or working virtually. And in order to take the pressure off the low back, I recommend people get a standing desk that they can stand up and work for a little bit. And every, say, 1 to 2 hours, I recommend everyone who is sitting to stand up and work. So they can get a standing desk, or they can just stand up and do their work, take a break, and make sure they take that pressure off the low back.
Well, I know the extroverts like that. They're probably standing up, walking around. Now, when should someone with sciatica or back pain stop self-managing and seek immediate medical attention, right? When does it go from, oh, this is just uncomfortable, to, hey, this is a warning sign and you should not ignore this?
Great question. Between 50 to about 90% of cases usually resolve themselves in about a 6-week time period. Now, once we get past the 6-week time period, I would recommend them to go and see their local healthcare professional to make sure that there's nothing else going on. They want to check and make sure there's not any other types of injuries, any deeper issues, and to make sure that it's actually being managed properly, because these things actually can go away as time goes on, but you have to make sure it's managed correctly.
And can you speak to that management? If I have back pain and I come into your office, what are some of the things that you all do in your clinic?
Well, the first thing we do is we're going to do a thorough evaluation, a consultation, find out exactly what's going on, do a history, see exactly what it is that could have caused this. And then we're also going to use some scanning technology to see exactly where the issue is coming from, which spinal level. We're going to be very specific. We're going to check, how your nervous system is functioning in that area. We're going to check the musculature and see if there's any muscle tension in the area. And then even more important than that, we're also going to take some x-rays to see what the condition of the spine is. Because usually in that age range between, 35 and 50, we're starting to see, symptoms of arthritis, disc degeneration and things of that nature. So we want to look at all of that. And then after we gather all that information, then we'll come up with a treatment plan that'll help them get the results they're looking for.
And you mentioned the 30 to 50-year-old age group. What is it about that group in particular? Is there anything that the 20-year-olds and the teenagers can do to prevent themselves from being those 30 to 50-year-olds who have to end up saying, hey, can you help me?
Absolutely. The research has shown that actually now there are high schoolers that are starting to show early stages of spinal degeneration and arthritis. And what that has been due to is actually wearing heavy book bags. So because we have lockers, usually in most high schools and some middle schools, you have lockers. I tell students, make sure they're not carrying all of their books with them all the time, because for the most part, they don't need all of them at the same time. So put your books in your locker, make sure your book bag is not too heavy, and make sure you're exercising, stretching, and doing those types of things to keep the body moving, because motion is what really helps that spine stay healthy.
And can you talk about the stretches and exercises? Is it bench press? Now, keep in mind, I don't go to the gym. So when I do little motions, it may be off. But is it bench pressing? What type of exercises and stretches are going to be best for that lower back area in particular?
The most important thing you want to focus on is making sure that you have strong core strength. A lot of times we think of our core as like our stomach, our abs, maybe the sides, the obliques, those areas. But your core actually is the entire area. It's from the stomach wrapping all the way around to the lower back. So doing lower back exercises, doing things like planks, making sure your abs and your core is strong, that all works to help strengthen the lower back.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the opposite of going to the gym would be sleeping. So is there a certain mattress? Sometimes you see these commercials and they're like, hey, if you have back pain, get this mattress. Is there a certain type of mattress that people are sleeping on in your clinic that you say, hey, this is what is used to support you, especially that lower back area?
Yes. Most of the time, the issue with people is that their mattresses are too soft. A lot of people, come in and tell me like, hey, I went out of town and I slept on this firmer mattress, or it was actually a little bit hard, but I felt like I slept better. And the reason that is because our spines actually require support. So a firmer mattress is definitely recommended for people of all ages to make sure that they have the proper support so they can get better sleep. This is actually the reason why, we don't see water beds anymore. People of a certain age know about water beds and how there was no support and that bed was constantly moving. We have to make sure we have enough spinal support. So any type of bed that has, the memory foam type of material, those Tempur-Pedic, the purple mattress, Sleep Number, those types of things where you can adjust the firmness or have a little more support, those are what's best.
Look, the old waterbed, that was, what was it, the 80s? I was there. So a question for you. When people have back pain, right? When should they definitely come in to see you? Is it, we go from it just being uncomfortable, but what are some glaring warning signs of, hey, this is something that you just can't ignore at this point that is doing actual nerve damage? So when should they see a chiropractor? When should they see an orthopedic surgeon, a neurosurgeon? What are some of those warning signs?
Excellent question. So the first thing is anything that's going to last past, 48 to 72 hours, you definitely want to go to your first line of defense, and that's to go, to the chiropractor. We specialize in low back and spinal health, and we'll check and see exactly what's going on. We're taking a more conservative route to see exactly what's going on. Usually within about 4 to 6 weeks of seeing a chiropractor, if things have not resolved themselves properly, what we'll do is we will refer out to the orthopedist, and the orthopedist will check and see if there's anything deeper, whether there needs to be MRIs ordered, whether there's any type of tumor, any type of fracture, anything that may have not been caught before and didn't respond to conservative care. It's referred out to the orthopedist, who would then refer it out to neurosurgery if this is an acute issue or a chronic issue that's just not resolving.
And how can people avoid some back problems? Are there any do's and don'ts, any social history kind of red flags that you look for to say, hey, if you cut out this, then this may actually get better?
Yes, absolutely. The most important thing we want to do is make sure we're taking care of our posture. We want to take a look at how we're sitting, especially when we're sitting for extended periods of time. And we want to pay attention to how we're lifting things. A lot of times people get injuries from picking things up off the floor, picking up children, reaching back, turning and twisting and lifting all at the same time. We want to make sure we're using our legs more than our lower back so that we're not injuring ourselves. Another thing we also want to do, which we mentioned before, is we want to stretch on a daily basis. We want to stretch ourselves, or, there are actually companies out now that actually will stretch you. There are assisted stretching companies that will stretch you. So assisted stretching, drinking plenty of water, keeping that body hydrated, because the discs in between the spinal bones are actually hydrated with water. So the more water we drink, the better and healthier our joints will be.
Well, nearly 1 in 4 people will experience chronic pain at some point in their life. And if I was one of those people, I would want to know, who can I go to? So Dr. Bowler, thank you for joining us today. And if the audience has any further questions, where can they find you?
They can find me at Vital Life Chiropractic. We're in the Metro Atlanta area. They can give us a call at 404-781-9041, or they can hop on our website at livingvitallife.com.
All right, you heard it, livingvitallife.com. Thank you so much for being here.
All right, thank you for having me.
And still to come, my next guest says everyone over the age of 65 should be on Medicare. She explains why.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
There are so many questions and misconceptions surrounding Medicare and Medicaid, namely, what is the difference between the two and who should be taking advantage of these programs? So joining me now is Adamika Meadows, author, the CEO of Health Tech for Medicaid. Welcome, Adamika.
Welcome. Hello, good afternoon. It's good to see you again, Ebony.
That's why I was saying welcome back, because clearly we need you. All right. Because The question is, what are the major differences between Medicare and Medicaid?
Sure. So Medicare, so think care, is a federal program, just federal program. And they sound very similar, right? Care and aid. But Medicare is primarily age-based. So it's a health insurance that you earn after working and paying into the system. And it typically starts at age 65. Medicaid, so think aid, is income-based or typically income-based and supports people with lower incomes, disabilities, a lot of children, about 50% of the children in this country, and many older adults who also need longer-term care and also income qualify. So that's where it gets a little confusing, because there are older adults over 65. Now that's where they can get both Medicare and Medicaid, and they're called dual eligibles or Medi-Medis.
Medi times two. And why do you say that all senior citizens should actually be on Medicare? Like, are they automatically enrolled when we turn 65? Do we get the letter in the mail says, welcome, you're now in Medicare, or do we have to apply for that?
You have to apply. And let me stress this. You are entitled to this, but if you do not get on it, you can get penalties. So let's just step back. What most people don't realize, especially in the Black community or any community of colors, is that millions of senior citizens actually qualify for like both programs. But you want to actually, as soon as you turn 65, even if you have a job that you have health insurance already, every senior should be on Medicare. Okay. It's one of the most important guarantees as an American lifetime. You've worked, you've paid into the system, you've contributed, you are insured some sort of health care in your older age in this country. And the biggest mistake people make is that they delay their enrollment. They wait till they're 67 or they wait till they're 70 or they wait till they retire. Or they misunderstand their eligibility. So if you're 64, you need to be thinking about, when I turn 65, I need to get on Medicare. It needs to be like the rite of passage. Like when you turn 21, you know what you can do.
Right.
When you turn 65, like when you turn 16, you know you can drive, or in other states it's 50. But like that should lead to, because what happens is you can get penalized and it can lead to a lifelong penalty. So if you are eligible, enroll. It protects your health, but it also can protect your financial future. Because the biggest thing that bankrupts people, it helps your generational savings. The biggest thing that bankrupts people is their medical debt.
And when you say it can penalize you, what is the penalty? Do they send you a bill because you didn't enroll, or how does that work?
Yeah, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. There are penalties by each type. So let me just tell you, there are different types of. So there are parts to Medicare, and you'll learn this when you apply for Medicare. So you'll hear Medicare Part A, B, C, D, right? So Part A covers your hospital care. Part B is your outpatient, or basically you going to the doctor's office. Part C, we don't really talk about, but it's for Medicare Advantage. So that's a specific type of, if you decide to go into that sort of a Medicare program. But Part D is really important. This is why every single person who's over 65 should actually be on this program. It is prescription drugs. And so if anything, you want your drug coverage to be at Medicare rates. But you also have rights to enroll. And so the penalties, going back to that, the penalties are different by each part. So the penalties for Part A are a little different than B, that are different than D. But you don't want to have any penalties, right? We don't even need to get into the nuances of the penalties, because if you enroll at 65, you won't have any penalties at all. But you have more rights than you realize. You have the right to clear information. You have the right to compare plans. Nobody should be telling you what plan you need to be on. You have the right to appeal a decision. And you have the right to receive language support and accessibility support. You should not feel rushed or pressured. You should not feel like you need to choose a certain specific plan. Medicare is not a favor. It is not a handout. It is a benefit you have earned.
And how do you find an advocate to help you navigate to enroll into these programs? You know, I think that's one of the big things. It's like a mystifying thing of, we hear about Medicaid, we hear about Medicare. It's like, do I do that at my doctor's office? Do I go to the hospital? How do I actually get enrolled in Medicare or Medicaid?
Yeah, and it's hard because there are TV commercials, there's all sorts of things. Look, and this is where our community really needs to step up. You don't have to navigate this alone. Every state has free Medicare counseling programs, and they're called SHIP programs, State Health Insurance Assistance Programs, right? They are free trained counselors. They're paid for by the federal government that help you compare plans at no cost, right? So every state has to have that. But this is where most community centers or churches, you can go to lots of trusted folks that you believe in. A lot of people are a part of organizations. Utilize the people that you trust, your trusted messengers, to help you walk through this process. But every state does offer this for free at no cost. And this is not something where you should feel like, you know, Big Brother is behind something. This is a benefit you have earned. Now, I will not, say that there are, plans trying to lure you one way or another. That's why there are TV commercials, there are billboards on the freeway, et cetera. But I want you to know, this is where your family members can help, your neighbors can help, your churches, your pastors. This is where our community really needs to come together. And that's why I'm here today. I want to make sure that people understand, because one medical event can wipe out your generational savings. Mm-hmm. And so the sooner you are on these programs, the better. Even if you're working, Medicare can be your primary or your secondary insurance, but you should absolutely have that card in your wallet.
And do they have to pay extra money? I think this is what a lot of people may ask is, hey, if I have health insurance through my job, I have to pay for that. Do I have to pay money to have Medicare or Medicaid? So a little different. If you're utilizing the services, you will pay into but to have a card costs you no money, right? And oftentimes, and this is where when you walk through with somebody, a lot of times it's cheaper for people to use Medicare as their primary and their employer as their secondary, because Medicare usually pays at better rates for it may give you access to better doctors, better specialists. And this is where it gets to be a little complicated. If you have an employer, they typically know a group of people that are over 65, and they look forward to you using your Medicare because it helps save some money for the company. So they often provide services where they say, if you also have Medicare, please come over here. And they help you figure out
no, use our coverage is better than Medicare. Use Medicare first and use our coverage first and use Medicare as your secondary. But typically, if you have an employer, they will walk you through that process so that you don't pay extra copays, that sort of thing. Some people use their Medicare, their employee, they use their primary coverage for their employer, but they use their Medicare for their medications because their medications copay is much cheaper. So that is where it gets a little tricky because each plan and what you choose will determine that. Does that make some sense? It's a little nuanced because it's not like we have one plan. Depends on where you live, what plan you choose.
Right. And and if you're listening to this, and let's say I'm 68 and I'm hearing about this for the first time, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, she said I had to do this when I was 65.
Yeah.
Is it too late to enroll, for one? And when you talk about penalties, are they going to be in trouble when they walk into? Are they going to say, well, now that you're late, there's nothing we can do to actually help you?
No, it's never too late. And I would say you always should apply because having health coverage is better than having no coverage. Oftentimes, if you are employed and you didn't get the opportunity, some employers will help pay your penalties. If you're 68, the penalties should not be that high. If you're 98, those penalties may be, quite high. This is also where an advocate can be very helpful. But, honestly, everyone needs to be on this program. And the more that we let people know 65, get on Medicare, the better, for sure.
That's all right. And
it doesn't matter if you are wealthy. I mean, people say, I've got plenty of money. 65, get a Medicare card. Every person who's over 65 in this country should have a Medicare card in their wallet.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all one cough away from bankruptcy. That's what I tell everybody. And you need to have as much support as possible. Now, in looking at it, recent policy changes, there's been this economic shift, right? When we're talking about Medicaid, Medicare, and billions up for grabs as far as the trust fund that has been established for Medicare. What do you think is going to happen with this newly updated report from the Congressional Budget Office? How does it impact the people who are actually using Medicare and Medicaid? Are they going to start to see their benefits kind of dissipate?
Okay. So here is my advice. Stay calm. Avoid panic. Headlines about trust funds can sound super scary, but Medicare is not disappearing. Okay. Here's the thing I tell people all the time, and I spend a lot of time on the Hill. Most of the people on the Hill, what do they look like?
Exactly.
They're over 65. And you know what they definitely have in their wallet? Medicare. All of the people in Congress all have a Medicare card in their wallet. Okay. Right. So policymakers are going to make smart decisions to keep the program financially strong as America ages. But the easiest thing for us to do in this country, the easiest policy for us to pass is elder policy, because oftentimes we are talking to folks who are older. So for beneficiaries today, coverage continues, but it does reinforce a few things, just to be clear. It's why innovation, prevention, better chronic disease management is important because it's going to be important for us to save money over time. The real issue isn't cost here. It's how do we deliver better care earlier so people stay healthy? And so, something like a Medicare trust fund concerns, who it should concern is Ebony, you and I, right? It's not going to be of concern to anyone who's over 65 today. Right. So I would really honestly stay calm, avoid panic. And if you're over 65, tell everybody to get their card.
Right. Thank you, Adamika, for coming here again to help us break this all down. I'm sure it will not be our last time calling you back because this is a very complicated situation. But if anyone is out there saying, hey, I don't have an advocate, I need some resource, is there anywhere they can follow you on social media that maybe you drop some gems that they can pick up where can they look for you?
Sure. So I run a nonprofit organization in this country called Health Tech for Medicaid, but I'm known on all the handles as Madam Medicaid, so at Madam Medicaid. But you can actually go to our organization, www.ht4m.org. We send people all over the place all the time. We have a large newsletter with, 82,000 people on our mailing list. You can add yourself to the mailing list. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're everywhere. And we are advocates of people's health in general. I'm an epidemiologist by training. I ran hospitals in the US for well over 15 years. So I do care deeply about the public's health. While I am known for writing fundamental policy in Medicaid, I have family members over the age of 65 deeply. I fractionally caregive for a 95-year-old who's my grandmother, and my mother's, turning 75 next week. So I deeply care about our community, knowing about their healthcare. So please reach out organizationally or to me personally. Would always be glad. I spend lots of time with states, leaders, governors, state Medicaid directors, and we'll, point you in the direction you need to go in for sure.
I tell you all the time, protection of your health and definitely as we age, being able to secure that health insurance so you don't dip into your savings account is a way you can create generational wealth, right? We talk about that all the time. So these two are very
definitely protect it for sure. Yes.
Exactly. Well, thank you for being here again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And are Black women being poisoned by beauty products? Well, my next guest has research that you don't want to miss, so stay with us.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Now, many of us remember the documentary called Good Hair, right? It was produced by comedian and actor Chris Rock back in 2009, and he spent months of tracking and researching the dangerous chemicals and perms that Black women were putting in their hair. Now, new research is revealing that there are some harmful chemicals linked to cancer in hair extensions and braiding products as well. So joining me now is Dr. Elisa Franklin, a research scientist dedicated to advancing environmental health and beauty justice. She's working with Silent Spring Institute. So help us, Dr. Franklin. Thank you for joining us.
I am so honored to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Now, what made you start this research in the first place?
So it's very personal to me, I guess you could say. So my research started with just thinking of I was getting training, right? So I started my career at Silent Spring Institute, where I was doing a postdoctoral research fellowship. And I was learning a lot about environmental chemicals, and they brought up this idea that flame retardants were harmful. And at the time, how long does it take for a Chicago person to tell you they're from Chicago? Yeah, so this is where I insert that part. I know growing up on the south side of Chicago, I would frequent the beauty supply stores. And at the beauty supply stores, you would see on the hair, hey, flame resistant, flame retardant. So I'm sitting in a meeting and we're preparing to publish this paper, and it said, hey, flame retardants, we're trying to swap them out from people's couches. And I'm sitting there well, if we don't want people to have them in their couches, why are people openly purchasing them to wear so intimately, such as hair extensions? Wow. And so that was kind of where the question started, and it grew from there, but it really started with that. If you don't want them in the couch, why should it be on my head?
Ooh, if you don't want them on the couch, why should it be on my head? And you bring up a big, point. First of all, what dangerous chemicals did you find, and what harms are associated with these types of chemicals?
So to date, this is the most comprehensive analysis of hair extension. So we actually went this route of not necessarily looking for specific chemicals, but collecting our data and then asking the data, what's found? What did you find in this analysis? And so we actually found a lot of chemicals that are not typically identified or found in consumer products generally. So we found things like phenol, we found benzoyl chloride, and this category of chemicals called phthalates and organotin compounds. And this is all to say, these are chemicals that have been associated with some pretty bad health outcomes.
And when you mention bad health outcomes, can you list them for our viewers?
So there's always the big one, cancer, which everyone's very concerned about. But then you think about the fact that there's a lot of folks out there that are suffering with infertility. So some of these chemicals are also reproductive toxicants and are known to cause birth defects. And even endocrine disrupting chemicals were found in this. So hormone disruptors.
And is this just synthetic hair? I bet people right now are looking and they're touching themselves okay, is it just synthetic hair? Is it human hair? Where are these chemicals that you speak of?
So we tested human hair, we tested synthetic hair, we tested wigs, we tested eyelashes and banana fibers. And the eyelashes were actually made out of silk. And so we tested a wide range of products. So 43 commercially available products.
And were they pretty much found in all those products?
41 out of 43 of the products had at least one chemical that was listed as a hazardous chemical on some authoritative list.
Now, are these chemicals currently regulated by the FDA, or are there gaps in the oversight that allow these chemicals to be in products that women are thinking, hey, if I'm buying this in a store, someone must have looked at this before and said, this is actually healthy for me to kind of consume?
Yeah, there's often this misunderstanding or this perception that chemicals or products have to be tested for safety before they're put on the shelves and before they're put on the market. And that's simply not true. Chemicals, there are thousands of chemicals that are introduced every year into the market without actually being tested for safety. And even when some products may be tested for some health outcomes like cancer, we may not know at that time before it's put on market or when they're doing these testings that it may be a reproductive toxicant or it may be associated with birth defects. And so chemicals are not tested for safety. Usually, we live in a society, we live in a world where it's innocent until proven guilty. So a chemist comes up with this new formula and can produce this new chemical, and it has this function that some organization or some manufacturer needs. They put it in their products, and then later on there's some recall, or they found out later that these chemicals are toxic. And I think it's a bit backwards, but that's just the state of how chemicals are introduced.
It's one of these things too. I think a lot of viewers will say, okay, if I wear braids for a long time, right? We hear about protective styles, particularly in the summertime, we're wearing our braids. Is it related to how long you have the braids in, right? How long it comes into contact with our scalp? Does that increase the chemical absorption? Or, if I have it only for me to go to Mexico or to Jamaica for my girls trip, then I should be okay.
Yeah, cumulative risk is something that I mainly tell folks to focus on. So we're not just introduced to one chemical that's in one product at one time. It's like we're using multiple products. I know today so far I've probably used 7 products, And so if you're thinking about it, each one of those products contain multiple chemicals. And so I think about just mitigating the risk. So for now, if you want braids, you may not know exactly what chemicals are in the braids for now because that information is just not publicly available. But to some degree, you have some some autonomy when it comes to those personal care products that list the ingredients. And we know based on our prior research that when consumers or users of these products do intentionally select their products based on ingredients and avoiding certain ingredients, they can reduce their exposures to those chemicals that they are trying to avoid, or similar chemicals.
Now, is it one of these things where you hear people say, hey, boil your water, right? We have a water advisory, boil water in order for you to drink it. Can you do something to the hair, right? To the braids or the extension to the wig? Can you boil it, or can you, I don't know, some type of way remove the chemicals? Or is this just this is the way this synthetic fiber was made and there's nothing you can do about it? It will pose a risk to your health regardless.
To our knowledge, there's no evidence that any type of rinse or washing can completely remove any chemical or completely eliminate risk of exposure to chemicals. However, with our study, we did do a simulation of an apple cider vinegar rinse or vinegar rinse of some of the synthetic braiding hair. And based on our findings, there is limited evidence that doing some type of rinse can remove some of the chemicals, but definitely not all. It's just a small amount of some of the chemicals that are removed from the product when doing the rinse.
And what about chemicals? You know, we talk about the hair and the synthetic wigs and or human hair, but what about chemicals that are in our shampoos and conditioners? You studied those too, right?
Yes. So
is there any advice on the labels that we should be looking at on these packages to see, should I get this one or should I not?
Yeah. And so going back to the question about rinsing and washing, I do know that some folks will say with their human hair samples, for example, is, hey, well, I rinse my hair or wash my hair before I install it. But the shampoos and the conditioners and whatever treatments you're adding to the human hair may have chemicals in it that have their own associated risk. And so to answer the question around what should you look out for in those, I typically go for saying, like, I'd like to suggest going for fragrance free, though fragrance is very difficult to avoid in products. I know that, for instance, I've gone to the store and tried to shop fragrance free for my hair products. Couldn't find a product. Could not find one product in that store that I went to. So it is very difficult to shop fragrance free because a lot of these products that are used in hair always have some fragrance added to it. But other chemicals to look out for would be parabens and also things like formaldehyde releasers. One of the most common formaldehyde releasers is dimethylamidate. And the reason why you would want to avoid formaldehyde releaser is because we know that these are chemicals known to release formaldehyde, which is a known cancer-causing chemical.
Wow. You know, given that Black women in particular are disproportionately using these products, are we looking at this as a broader environmental justice issue? And what do you think needs to change at a policy level?
Yes. So we know that all folks who wear hair extensions should raise an eyebrow for them, but also Black women are one of the largest consumers of these products. We know that Black women are disproportionately exposed to some of the chemicals that are in these products. And these are chemicals that are associated with things like breast cancer, which we know Black women have the lowest survival rate of. And so this is definitely something to consider when you're thinking about like overall justice issues and whether Black women are disproportionately harmed in harm's way as it relates to some of these products. And yeah, I do think that it's important that when we think about policies, that is really where we should aim to make changes at. Like right now, we're in the primaries in Texas here where I'm at in Houston. And I highly recommend looking at the candidates and seeing if there's anyone who is caring about chemical policies and seeing if that is the right candidate for your vote. Also, another thing to really support is third-party testing, because a lot of time products can be labeled as whatever, but there are a lot of these terms like non-toxic or toxic-free are actually not regulated by any authoritative organization, or it's not regulated under like any federal laws or anything like that. So that's another thing to consider. And yeah, really considering like ways to make sure that chemicals are required to be tested before they're actually put in our products, and they're free. They don't cause harm. I just really believe that we shouldn't have to choose between our health and beauty, like choosing our favorite beauty products.
Right. You know, Black women, we want solutions, right? For ourselves, we want solutions for we have daughters, you know, sons growing up, and we're buying these products and we're bringing them home. Are there really any solutions at this moment? Where can we be pointed to say, hey, if you're going to try a product, maybe try this one?
Yeah, so I suggest aiming to purchase products from companies that is their bottom line. That is their goal, is to create a safer product for the consumer, because we know that at the end of the day, those are the ones that are going to always be trying to make sure that they have a product that is safe for their users and their customers. So that's one thing. I also, I think people should consider that if you're going to get the braids, maybe have the duration of the time you were in the braid. So maybe it doesn't have to be worn endlessly, maybe taking breaks in between, because we do know by reducing the amount of time you're exposed to something, you're also reducing your risk. So there's that. And another thing is considering how products, the other products you use, where can you control it at there? So if you know that you have a favorite product and they have a fragrance-free option, switch over to the fragrance-free option. If you know that there's a product that, you know, kind of don't like it anyway, and you keep using it, you know, maybe dropping that from your use list so that you can eliminate the chemicals that are in that. So there, I would say just mitigating your risk through the other products that you're using regularly.
You know, thank you, Dr. Franklin, for shedding light on this issue that it literally sits on the intersection of beauty, health, and justice. So if there's anyone in the audience who is saying, hey, I need somebody to help guide me, then where can they find your research? Is there a podcast? Is there an IG? Where can they find you?
Yes. So I'd like to start off with your daily support, something that you can use in your day-to-day, which is an app or apps. There are a lot of them out there now, but apps that can support your shopping. So there's an app called, at Silent Spring, we have the Detox Me app, which helps you with learning more about how to reduce your exposures in your everywhere where you live, work, and play. So the Detox Me app can help you with tips on how to reduce environmental exposures. There's also the Clearia app, where you can take a picture of ingredients labels and it'll tell you a little bit more about whether those chemicals are associated with harm. If you want to learn specifically about my research, you can go to silentspring.org. That is where you can find a lot of the work we've done and get to know a little bit more about what we're doing in the future. We're on all the social media platforms. And yeah, email me. I'm here to answer any questions or chat with anyone if they're interested in learning more about beauty justice.
Well, thank you so much. I will be downloading those apps today. Thank you. Up next, my prescription of the week.
I'm Brittany Noble, Midwest-born, HBCU educated with experience in newsrooms across the country. Well, I've teamed up with Roland Martin to bring to you The Breakdown. This isn't just news. It's our stories, our voice, our community. Join me for The Breakdown Monday through Friday at midday, only on the Black Star Network.
Black hair care and health, what you need to know. So Black hair care is much more than beauty. It's cultural identity, self-expression, and community. But some of the products we reach for every day may contain chemicals that could have real health implications. Research shows that many hair products marketed to Black women and girls contain endocrine disrupting chemicals, and these compounds can interfere with your hormones. These substances have been linked to earlier puberty, reproductive health issues, and even some cancers. In fact, chemical hair relaxers and straighteners have been widely used to change our hair texture, and they've been studied for years. Some large studies have found associations between frequent use of these products and higher risks of uterine, breast, and ovarian cancers. In one NIH study, women who used chemical straighteners more than 4 times per year had more than double the risk of uterine cancer compared to women who didn't. And it's not just straighteners. Analysis of thousands of personal care products marketed specifically to Black women found that only a small percentage were rated low hazard, meaning most contained ingredients with potential toxic effects. Some products have been linked to higher exposure to hazardous chemicals like phthalates, parabens, and formaldehyde-releasing agents, all of which can disrupt hormone and reproductive health. Even synthetic braiding hair, often thought to be safe protective style, has raised concerns. A recent Consumer Report analysis found that popular brands of synthetic hair contain volatile organic compounds, lead, and other dangerous chemicals that can expose users and stylists to airborne toxins. These exposures don't happen in a vacuum. Many communities of color have fewer low-hazard product options, leading to disproportionate chemical exposure compared with products marketed to other groups. So what can you do? Choose products with transparent ingredient lists and fewer synthetic chemicals. Look for certified safer or plant-derived alternatives. Advocate for clearer labeling and stronger regulation so that everyone has access to products that support, not compromise health. Your hair care routine should uplift you, not come with hidden costs to your health. And that, my friends, is my prescription of the week. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.